You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi everybody, and thanks as ever for coming back to hear me ramble on about my 2019 through hike of the Appalachian Trail. The show is Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, and I'm Mighty Blue. This time, it is just me rambling on. No guests, just my best recollections of the past 5 days since we last chatted. Before we get on though, let's hear from our sponsor, Sawyer. When I hit the trail in 2014, I soon discovered that I come with the wrong water filter. Everybody else had a Sawyer squeeze. Eventually I bought a squeeze and I loved it. I'm going again this year, and top of my list of things to buy was the new micro squeeze filter by Sawyer. Like all Sawyer stuff, it just works. You can filter up to 100,000 gallons, and their full-size squeeze filter comes with a lifetime warranty. Last year, believe it or not, more than 4 million people got clean water through a Sawyer water filter. But if you think that Sawyer is just about water filters, you could not be more wrong. Nope, they supply everything to protect you, both in the backcountry and the backyard. Protect your gear and clothes as I did with their permethrin fabric treatment, which is 100% odorless after drying. With all the ticks and bugs around, this is an absolute must. They also provide sunscreens and first aid products. Find out more by visiting Sawyer.com. Thanks, guys. When we last spoke, I believe we'd already decided that the weather forecast was so ominous that a 0 day was in order. Do you know what? We were not wrong. Here's what happened on day number 115. Day number 115, a 0 day. The weather looked really, really lousy, so all 5 of us, which was me, Trigger, Turd Ferguson, Sharktooth, and Firefly, were all at the same hotel, the Holiday Inn Express, and we were just becalmed. You know, we were. There was nothing we could really do. I actually decided to give myself plenty to do. I wanted to do a podcast, so I did the podcast I did last time. Then I headed down to the outfitter in town so that I could buy myself a second pair of pants. No more running up and down the corridor at hotels in my long johns to do the laundry. Poor old Trigger, he's been doing the laundry most of the time. So I said to her, I'm going to buy some pants and get myself a second pair of pants. I've just been wearing one pair now for, well, actually the whole trip. So really it's been pretty disgusting. So I've now got a second pair of pants. I went down to this outfitter's. I think I got an Uber down there and then walked back. And the reason I wanted to do it really was so I could actually do the laundry myself. So I got all the laundry stuff together, went and did that. So really, you know, I made sure I was busy that morning. I put the podcast together in the room before I went to the outfitters. When I went to the laundry, I put all the pieces of the podcast together and published it. So it worked out, or sent it to Ryan so he could publish it. And it worked out really, really nicely, actually. I was really pleased. And the reason there was a bit of a rush around by then, because Nate, or Turd Ferguson, wanted to see Rocket Man. And so which is a story about Elton John. And so we all got into an Uber yet again, to a nearby town and, went to watch Rocket Man, which was excellent, by the way. A story about Elton John. Really enjoyed it. And we had dinner nearby afterwards. So it was a different day for us, I guess. When we were sitting there, in fact, Firefly had been reading the weather forecast, and as you know, these weather forecasts are sometimes notoriously unreliable. And this one was saying that the weather was going to carry on wet because it was raining by now, been pouring outside. It was going to carry on wet overnight and wet tomorrow morning, which was going to be the Friday morning. And so she said, why don't we just go for a later start, because we check out the hotel about 11. Why don't we go about 10:30, 11:15 and see, if we can beat the rain that way. So That seemed a good idea. So we all went to bed that night, unsure of what we'd be doing the following day, but we knew we wouldn't have to rush up in the morning, which was really nice to think of, I've got to tell you. But that's the end of a 0 day, which was day number 115. Day 116, New York 17A, which is mile 1385.7, to a stealth camping site at 7 Lakes Drive, mile 1,400.6 miles, which is a total of 14.9 miles. As I said to you yesterday, we talked about the weather forecast. We to be honest with you, sometimes we just talk about nothing but the weather forecast. It's often wrong, and we still keep looking at it. But in this particular day, it turned out to be right. We got an Uber for about 10:45. It came a little bit earlier than we were expecting it, so we got there a bit earlier than we wanted to. And we got started about 11:10 that morning. And it was spitting with rain a little bit, but we were undercover, didn't have to worry about things too much. And we all headed off as a 5-person tramley, which was me, Trigger, Turd Ferguson, Sharptooth, and Firefly. And we were all hiking on pretty well together. Eventually, of course, Trigger and I got left behind because the other three are certainly faster than us. But then we caught them again at the Lemon Squeezer. For those of you who haven't, you may have seen it in some pictures and so on. You may have heard about it. You may have even seen it yourself personally. But the Lemon Squeezer is an interesting little thing. You come to this large rock and there's a white arrow pointing you one way, and you start going in there. You think, oh my gosh, that's narrow. And it's 2 pieces of rock effectively at an angle. So you're sliding along or trying to push your way between these 2 pieces of rock. And we kept our packs on. We didn't really need to. We could have taken our packs off, but for some reason, we kept our packs on. We eventually got through the Lemon Squeezer, which was fine, and that's okay. Then there's a bailout point where you can go a Blue Blaze trail further down the path and around to the end of the next part of the Lemon Squeezer, because the next part is a vertical wall of about, I don't know. Sorry about that. I just rattled the lampshade behind me, in case you're wondering what it was. The vertical wall, and there are a couple of footholds and a couple of handholds. How anybody under 6 feet tall does this, I have no idea, unless they do it with some help. But typical guys, of course, we didn't want any help. So Turd got up there first. The girls got up there as well, and I think one got a bit of a helping hand to get up there. But I know I should have asked for assistance. I just couldn't. So I started I pushed my pack up there, and they took the pack, and that was fine. But then I started trying to get my foot in the footholds, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is easy. This is going to be tougher than I thought. And eventually I was able to get a handhold, and then a foothold, which was stretching my legs really wide apart. And I eventually pulled myself up. But you know what? I kind of liked it. This climbing stuff is kind of enjoyable, and it felt like an achievement to me to get up there, because I know that when I did it in 2014, I did take the assistance of a guy who was with us at the time. But this time I didn't, and I got up there. I was then hiking right behind Sharptooth, and suddenly she stopped, and there was a little rattlesnake in our way. So that was nice to see one of those. They're great. They're great looking creatures. They really are. This was quite a small one, and it wasn't rattling, but it was really nice anyway. We carried on hiking for about 10 miles, and as I say, the terrain was quite a lot kinder than it had been. The rain has stopped, and even though there were some damp patches on the rocks, we all felt pretty darn safe, and it was fine. And so we were quite happy with that. And we got to the William Bryan Memorial Shelter after about 10 miles. And so 10 miles since we started at 11:10 in the morning wasn't too bad. So Turd, Shark, and Firefly decided to stay, but Trigger and I decided to go on. And I was, I felt pretty good. And as we often do, we separate. If one goes ahead, they go further ahead. And there was this great rocky outcrop, the ledges, and we saw an amazing view of Manhattan. And I lived there in 2005, from 2005 to 2008. And it just filled me with great memories, obviously, of Manhattan. To be able to see it 35, 40 miles away, just across from one mountain, across beyond another mountain, was kind of otherworldly. And I really, really enjoyed seeing it. And I'll put a picture in the show notes of that. And hopefully you'll be able to zoom in on the picture. And then we passed the 1,400 mile marker in Stones, really nice one actually, and took a picture by that. So yeah, we're through 1,400 miles, which was lovely. We got some water near the road because I decided where I thought a good place to stop would be where I stopped in 2014. I know I'm repeating this sometimes where I go to the places I know, but frankly, if you know what a place works, let's go there. And it was a stealth camping site just across the road, just around a little corner, so not far from the road at all. But it looked just the same as it was when I was there. There was, I think somebody must have been there several times, and we sat around on the log and ate our food, set our tents up. It really was beautiful. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I felt good about the hike. We'd done 15 miles. I think it's about 15 miles. Yeah, 14.9 miles from 10 past 11 that morning. So we're still getting the miles in, and we're really pushing on. So we just sat around for dinner, as I say, and then got into our tents and went off to sleep. And that's the end of day number 116. Day 117, a stealth site at Seven Lakes Drive, mile 1400.6, to Greymore Spiritual Life Centre, mile 1412.0, just an 11.4 miles day. So, the previous evening, I'd gone to sleep in this stealth site, and I felt very comfortable there. It was a great evening with Trigger, just sitting, chatting quietly. It was very nice. So I went to sleep at about 9, as I say. Next thing I knew, it was 20 past 5. I had slept 8 hours. It was extraordinary. I couldn't believe it. And really, I felt very revived by the day. And it's kind of surprising what happened later on, because this was one of my worst days on the trail so far. We knew that, and the reason I stopped there actually the previous time was because Bear Mountain was coming up, and I was expecting it to be a tough climb. But it turned out, in a day of climbs, it wasn't the toughest climb of all. It was so well maintained. The path up is basically steps, literally steps, and quite wide, and the path down is steps as well. And so we went up and over Bear Mountain. As you come down all these beautifully paved steps, there's lots of other day hikers and even runners running around. And at the top you can drive to the top actually of Bear Mountain, and there are bicyclists cycling around all over the place. And at the very top, you can get a Powerade or a Gatorade or some water. And once again, great views of New York City, which I took pictures of from the top as well. So we headed down, and then you go into the park around the lake, and people were already setting up. This was about 9 o'clock in the morning, maybe a bit earlier actually, setting up for their food and drink for the day. The Latin music was starting to make itself known and heard, and it was a great party atmosphere of all these families who come around this lake and barbecue all day long and have a great time. But I was going to pick up my poles I got from Z-Packs. They're what's it called now? I've forgotten what it's called now. This is not good, by the way. I apologise for this. I'm doing this late at night. I'm quite tired. The Flex freestanding kit. That's right. I'd ordered them some time ago, and eventually I was picking them up in Fort Montgomery post office. So we got an Uber from Bear Mountain to Fort Montgomery, and got my sticks and my poles rather. And we asked the lady, where's a decent place to have something to eat? So she said the deli across the road. And we went across the road. We had breakfast sandwich, and I think Trigger bought himself something else to eat later on as well. And met a couple of older guys as well who just chewing the fat, as New Yorkers often do, and wanted to know about our hike, which was really nice chatting to them about it. They were impressed the fact that a couple of old guys like themselves were actually doing the hike. So we rather like that. And they said, we'll run you back to the zoo. We were about to get an Uber. They said, we'll run you back to the, not the zoo, to the Bear Mountain Inn. And they did exactly that. Took us back there and waved us goodbye and said, best of luck with your hike. And it was really nice that they were like that. So from there, we went back down to the lake, carried on around the lake, and then you turn right and go down to the zoo. The zoo was opening at 10 o'clock, so we were already past that, having gone into Fort Montgomery, got my package and eaten, and we went through the zoo, and it's pretty worth visiting once, but we didn't see too many animals in there. And in the black bear cage, there was what seemed to be a brown bear, so that was slightly confusing. We didn't see many other animals at all, actually. And you come out of the zoo, and the exit from the zoo takes you right to the bridge across the Hudson River. And of course, the noise of the traffic is eye-opening again. But we wandered across the bridge, and slightly confused about which way we were going. Eventually, we pushed left. There were a bunch of cars there, and we went past them and up this climb, which was one of the worst climbs we've had so far. Well, certainly for a long time. And I don't know what it was. I really don't know what it was. It may be because they were tough climbs, because that first one certainly was a killer for me. But this was a bad day for me. I don't know what it was that happened to me. I just absolutely lost all my energy, my general mojo, I guess. And there were a few climbs. This was a bad one. There was another bad one later, but my energy was sapping almost by the minute. And of course, my doubts start creeping in. Is there something wrong? And I'm afraid I also thought, have I got Lyme disease? And there are lots of ticks around. I've been checking myself all the time for Lyme disease. We shower quite often because we go to hotels quite often. And the ticks often, or some things come off us, and I just presume they're ticks from time to time. But all those doubts came up again. And we eventually came to this Appalachian deli, and I was feeling worse and worse. I knew Trigger wanted to do a 20-mile day. I said to him, I'm really sorry, man. I just can't do this. I'm done. And I'm going to go for the Graymore Centre and the Graymore Spiritual Life Centre. And I just want to go to sleep. I'm absolutely finished here. And being a good man that he is, he said, okay, let's do that. So we went from the deli, and we stayed there for quite a while, went to Graymore, and they got this quite a long walk into the ball field. And there were a few people mooching around. But I just set my tent up straight away, got in, and went straight to sleep. I mean, immediately I was asleep. People started coming in, and I think I woke up about an hour later, something like that. And I could hear people come in. I did not want to know. I didn't want to talk to anybody. Turd Ferguson looked into my tent, said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm okay. I'll be all right." And I felt a little better by then, but I was still so exhausted. I just lay there for another 3/4 of an hour before I eventually got out. And somebody organised, I think it was Firefly, organised some pizzas, and that was a performance in itself, by the way. The poor old driver had no idea where he was, and Firefly very kindly paid him a nice tip. The tip might be, don't be a pizza delivery driver. But eventually we had 4 pizzas, and we just sat around there. We met a bunch of new people, obviously the 3 that I've been talking about recently. A new guy called Bounce, who was a funny guy. Several flip-floppers. Bounce is one of those. The Wonder Women, 3 women of a certain age, let's say, who are just hiking the trail and just loving every moment. They're in their, I guess, their 60s. Very nice ladies. So we all sat around, had our pizza. It was a very, very convivial evening, and I started perking up as the evening went on. But when I got back into my tent that night, I was ready for sleep once more, and I crashed right out again. So that was the end of a pretty bad day for me. Day number 117. Day number 117. Day number 118, Graymore Spiritual Life Centre, mile 1412.0 to RPH Shelter, mile 1430.8. In the morning, and I hadn't slept very well because I was kind of worried that I did have Lyme disease. I just couldn't explain how melted down I felt. It had been hot, but it seemed to be something more than just tiredness. Maybe it was just exhaustion, and perhaps I needed that break. So I was really determined not to let Trigger down. So I was pushing on for quite a long day, and we're going to include 1-2 things as well. And so it was generally the general profile up from the Grey Moor is generally up. There are ups and downs, but generally you're tending upwards. So because there were no really stiff climbs, it was a far better day physically for me anyway. And I did feel a whole lot better. I really did. And just before Dennytown Road, we ran into a hiker, and Trigger, he said hi to Trigger first. Then he looked at me, he said, "Are you Mighty Blue?" I said, "Yes, I am." And he introduced himself as a guy called Stan the Man. He'd met many of my guests in the past, and he'd helped slap back a few of them. So he kind of knew us quite well. And he pulled from his bag a couple of frozen Powerades. And Sharktooth happened to turn up just at that time. And he gave his third of 3 Powerades to Sharktooth, who was very happy, let me tell you. He also had some clementines, which he gave us as well. And we went down to Dennytown Road, and we turned Trigger and I turned the Powerade into a slushy. It was delicious. We just stood there crushing the bottle to try to break bits of ice down and suck a bit of juice out. And that was great. And we hung out doing that for about 15 minutes. And nearby there was a trash can on Dennytown Road, which I know these things don't sound very big to you, but trust me, a trash can where you can get rid of your trash is pretty darn nice. And there was a faucet where you could get some, not faucet, what's the word for it? A spigot where we could get some water, fresh water as well. So that was nice. A few miles later, there was the Canopus Beach, on Canopus Lake, in Clarence Farnestock State Park. And Trigger and I were very eager to go there because there was a grill room which was going to close rather at 4 p.m. We had plenty of time, and we could swim. So we took a Blue Blaze trail off the AT down to the water's edge, and I must admit I felt terribly out of place there. You know, there's many old hikers, and there's people in their shorts and swimming costumes and that, ready to go swimming. And of course, now I've got these new trousers, which you can detach the bottoms of the legs so they turn into shorts. So I thought, I'm going in swimming, definitely. So Trigger wanted to eat straight away, but no, he came round like a good team member and went up and got changed, and so we went in the water together. It was freezing, absolutely frozen, but it was so refreshing. And once you got under the water and you got used to it, it was beautiful, as you can imagine. So we got out and we went up to the grill room. And by then, Nate, Toad Ferguson and Firefly and Sharktooth had turned up, and there was a bunch of other hikers up there as well, all eating food from the grill, which was really good, by the way. And one of the guys hiking with us, and I apologise to him, I can't recall his name. No, I can't recall his name. He hiked in 2016 with a young woman, and I met Susan and Audrey. I think Susan was the girl. Audrey was the girl he was hiking with for most of the time. But I'm going to save their story for a full interview when I return home. Suffice it to say, they've got a story to tell, and I really, really like the two of them. They'd been very thoughtful about what trail magic they bought this guy and the rest of us. Beautiful grapes, peaches, strawberries, water, tons of water. It was just a really thoughtful thing for us. And of course, we were helping ourselves to tons and tons of fruit, which was great. I tell you, absolutely loved it. So 6 of us left together, which was the 3 I normally mentioned, plus Bounce and me and Trigger. And we headed to RPH shelter. And you come up and over Shenandoah Mountain, and there's a painted 9/11 memorial flag, which is still surprisingly resonant, even 18 years later. Seeing that flag on there, knowing that New York is just across the horizon, and that moment in time that thing happened, it was very emotional. I know that we all had our picture taken by the flag, and it's quite a thing to see. Yeah, it makes you think. It made me think last time, and it made me think this time as well. We've been very lucky. Well, firstly, water supply in this area is pretty lousy, but we've been very lucky because local people are so generous, or the clubs are so generous, and often at the road crossings there are these big plastic jars of water. And so we filled up, we came to one about 2.5 miles from shelter, and we came to one. And so we're all filling up our water, and I thought to myself, I think I'm going to go ahead. I want a good camping spot. And I seem to recall that the RPH shelter had limited camping spots. There were a number of them. There was plenty of space, but they weren't desperately flat. So I wanted my best shot. So I thought, I'm going to get back at it. And Trigger came with me. We caned it at the end. We got down there, I reckon, at 2.5 to 3 miles in about 40 odd minutes. And Bounce said, you must have been going 4 miles an hour. You were hurtling down the mountain. It's all because I was at a flat spot. And so we got a bit of a tented village. I've set myself up in the tent. And there was we met a bunch down there who were flip-flopping. And there were a tramley of 8 who seemed to be enjoying themselves way too much on the trail. They're just doing 5-mile days. And if they fancy it, or they go into town and get some sushi, or they stay at a hotel, and I think they've done about 2 months to get from Harper's Ferry. Anyway, we were sitting around chatting and they said, well, some of our guys are out getting sushi right now. If you want, we can get them to bring back extra beer. So I ordered a dozen beers, a dozen Yinglings, which we all seem to love. And they came back with a dozen Yinglings, which was rather nice. And we sat chatting as well until hiker midnight. And just before hiker midnight, Trigger and I decided to go and buy ourselves. Sorry about the traffic, by the way. Well, there's something really loud going past now. It's gone. Trigger and I decided to go and get some water. And I recall getting the water from the stream just before the shelter last time. And there was a bridge over the stream. And as somebody said to me, it flows better on the far side, on the near side, but it's so difficult to reach. So we went to the far side. I could not get enough underneath my bottle to get enough water. So I thought, I should be able to climb down there on the other side. So I went back across the bridge, started clambering down to realise how steep it was, got to the bottom, sat on a rock, and of course, put my foot on another rock, and that slipped away. So I was in the water up to my ankles, which was fine. I mean, no damage at all. Made it a whole lot easier to get the water. So I got myself some water, got Trigger some water, obviously upstream from my feet, and headed back to camp and back to bed. So that is the end of day number 118. Day number 119. RPH shelter, mile 1430.8 to NY22, Pauling, mile 1450.7, a 19.9 mile day. We had another early start. Both Trigger and I were up at 5. Actually, I was up at 10 to 5. We got out of camp having had breakfast at about 6:30, which was rather nice. As always, it's an early climb out of camp, or nearly always early climb. And we reached New York 52 and a 0.4 walk to Mountaintop Market Deli. You know, you've got to use these delis when you can and enjoy the food that's there. Unfortunately, Trigger and I went the wrong way. Went about a quarter of a mile downhill when it should have been 0.4 of a mile uphill. So having gone down a quarter of a mile, we came back a quarter of a mile to the start again, and then did the 0.4 mile walk to the Mountaintop Market Deli. We had a breakfast sandwich, and then we both took away an Italian sandwich for lunch. We just sat around for nearly an hour. The others turned up, and we were chatting to people while they were eating, and there was a spigot again to get water. It's amazing how when you've got limited possessions, you've got limited access to possessions and limited access to facilities even, you value what there is there. The fact there was a spigot there, how wonderful is that? And we just sat on a bench outside and just ate our food and just chatted with people. It was really nice. Eventually, though, we headed on, and we needed to head on because I was committing myself to getting to New York 22. I'm sure you remember an old friend of the show, Dr Lynne from DocSpot. I'm actually thinking of repeating those for the next hiker season because I think they're of value, and I think also Lynne can add stuff to them. So we talked about this today, actually. So I was meeting Lynne, and so we had to try for this near 20 mile day. But I'd also arranged to meet a listener, Eric Gross Jr., and I was hoping that all that was going to work out. I said we're going to be at this particular restaurant at 6:30, and do you know what? We were. So how about that? So because I was meeting Lynne, I knew it was going to be a 20-mile day. So Trigger just flew off. Once Trigger's got a bee in his bonnet, he wants to get to a certain place. He doesn't stop. He just keeps going and keeps going. So I spent much of the day by myself, and I was happy with that. You know, somebody asked me tonight, do we hike together all the time? Well, we do, Trigger and I, but sometimes we're a quarter of a mile or even a half a mile apart. But sometimes we're only about 5 yards apart. Generally, though, we know we're going to be meeting each other at the end of the day. We are each other's hiking partner, and he is my tramley right now. So hiking by yourself and it feels like it's by yourself when someone's half a mile, your partner is half a mile away. Your thoughts are different. You're literally on your own and thoroughly enjoyable. You know, if you're following somebody and they're setting the pace, then you kind of go where they go. You don't have to look so much about the white blazes. But I was, because I was by myself, of course, I was looking at all the white blazes and making sure I went the right way. New York is a very well-maintained state, but it's also a very well-marked state as well. I found that certainly today. So I was following the path round, and we got to the incredibly beautiful nuclear lake. Used to be a nuclear plant, apparently, but it's now all underwater. And it's a just gorgeous sight. It really is. And that lake was skirted as I just trudged on, and I was quickly running out of water. It's great that there is water at all these road crossings, but when you just can't get any water and you want it, it becomes more and more difficult for you. I find that anyway. But I was, I was following the profile, going along the top, and then suddenly we started moving down and down and down and down and down. So I knew we were eventually coming down towards New York 22. And we went on another one of those beautiful boardwalks. I love these things. The amount of work that's done to make this hike so lovely for us is just amazing. Another beautiful boardwalk. We ran into a day hiker, a lady called Rabbit, who looked, I'm not kidding you, no more than 15 years old, tops. Turns out she's 33. I still can't believe it. And she talked about her 53-year-old friend. I thought it must be a grandmother or something like that. No, it's a buddy of hers she used to work with. She's 33, charming young woman, and we just chatted and walked with her. And she gave us some water when she reached her car, and that was in the Appalachian Trail station parking lot. I think it's on Metro North Railway, the Appalachian Trail station. And so, unfortunately, I think it only goes into town on certain days, and we didn't see one stopping at the trail when we were there. So we said goodbye to her, and Lynne turned up soon after, and she proved to be even nicer in person than she was on the show, if that is at all possible. She was so pleased to see us, and even though we were both really disgustingly sweaty, she gave us both a big hug. It was just lovely. And she took us to the hotel, where Trigger and I both quickly showered, and then she took us to the laundry, which she could tell was desperately needed, and then to dinner. And Eric turned up, and we had a lovely evening together. Lynne's husband, Bob, joined us later as well. Another charming guy. We just had a really nice evening. And then Lynne took us back to the hotel. It really was the perfect end to a really, really good day. That's the end of day number 119. So, 1,450 miles down, and apart from my entirely unscientific and completely undiagnosed concern that I may have contracted Lyme disease, it's been another good few days. We've had great miles, decent weather management, and new and old friends. What more could you want? I'll see you next time.